My name is Elise Moran, and I work as a professional solo survival documentarian. I state that formally because every detail in what follows needs clarity and precision. This is the only way I know how to recount what happened in Granite Hollow. For context, I was scheduled to film a one-day field segment for an upcoming series, an instructional breakdown on low-elevation winter survival in the eastern Sierra foothills. Everything I brought was meticulously logged: 2 main cameras, 3 trail cams, a body mic, my backup DSLR, and a compact drone. That morning, I hiked into Granite Hollow at 6:12, confirmed coordinates, and started recording my opening pieces. At that moment, nothing was wrong. The hollow itself sits between 2 ridgelines, a shallow basin of stone, sage, and pale dust. It's the sort of place where sound behaves strangely. Even boots clicking on granite seemed too loud. The air was so dry that every breath scratched. I remember thinking it'd be an easy shoot, simple, controlled, perfect for a single-day run. But small inconsistencies showed up early, the kind you register subconsciously and then forget until they stack into something you can't ignore. At 7:03, while filming a segment on fire starting in windy conditions, my primary camera clicked off. I assumed battery issues. Cold sometimes triggers false low readings, so I swapped it out. When I checked the LED indicator, though, battery read full. I chalked it up to equipment glitch. Things like that always happen in the field. Technical failure is practically a coworker. Still, something about the timing put a faint pressure at the base of my spine, like my body noticed before my brain did. I moved deeper into the basin to demonstrate shelter placement against granite walls. The terrain requires focused footing, uneven rocks, dry gullies, loose scree. Filming while navigating all that is mentally draining, so I kept my attention forward, running through the script in my head. I didn't notice the second camera powering on until I heard its motorized stabilization hum behind me. I hadn't touched it. It was the trail cam I kept in my pack. The button isn't sensitive, those devices are rugged. For it to activate, something had to press and hold the recessed switch. I stopped walking. Wind moved through juniper branches, dry and rasping. Nothing else. I took the pack off, pulled the trail cam out, and sure enough, it was recording. I turned it off manually, checked for debris, confirmed the switch wasn't stuck. Everything was clean. This was the first time I said something out loud, barely above a whisper. That's not normal. The air didn't answer, but something about the stillness felt too aware. I tried to shrug it off. Realism is a discipline in my line of work. And realistically, equipment malfunctions happen. I reminded myself of that repeatedly, though each repetition felt thinner. At around 8:10, I set up my secondary angle camera on a tripod, pointing it toward a rock corridor that funneled wind like a quiet whistle. My body mic picked up the sound cleanly. I stepped in front of the lens, reciting a segment about resource scanning, how to evaluate for water, shelter, safe terrain. I walked a slow demonstration loop, gesturing toward the ridge crest to indicate potential windbreaks. When I circled back to the tripod, the camera's red indicator light was steady, recording. But when I glanced down at the small monitor screen, there were 2 figures. Me in the foreground, and someone roughly 3 feet behind me. A shape standing almost shoulder level to the top of the granite, positioned precisely in the spot where I had walked moments before. The silhouette wasn't crisp, but the proportions were unmistakably human. Upright, still facing the camera. I whipped around so fast I nearly tripped. Dust kicked up around my boots. Nothing stood behind me. Just open granite and brush. My own footprints were clear, uninterrupted, unchanged. I turned back to the monitor. The figure was gone, replaced by the empty frame I expected. I checked the playback. The clip showed me talking, moving through the demonstration, but the moment the second figure appeared, the footage cut to static. A tight burst of white noise. The rest of the clip was empty. There was no logical explanation. And logic is the backbone of my work. My job depends on clarity and evidence, not imagination. Even so, standing alone in that basin with no other humans scheduled to be within several miles, the idea that someone had been close enough to stand behind me, close enough to be filmed, hit me like a hard, cold fist to the ribcage. I scanned the area for footprints. Nothing. Just mine. The granite was clean and dry. Impossible to hide tracks here. At 8:30, I started packing more quickly than usual. Not panicked, just efficient. Hyper-efficient. I kept my back to the rock wall as I worked, because every time I faced open space, the thought came unbidden. Someone could be standing behind you again. I tried contacting my producer, but the signal flickered. My phone only pushed out one clipped message before failing. Equipment issue, wrapping early. When I slid the malfunctioning camera back into my bag, I heard the shutter click inside the pack. Then again, like the camera was taking pictures in the dark. That was the moment I realized something wasn't malfunctioning. Something was deliberately activating my gear. Something that wanted to be recorded. I didn't leave immediately, though every instinct screamed for it. The moment I zipped the pack and the shutter clicked again from inside, my first reaction wasn't to run but to confirm, to force the situation back into something rational. Panic clouds judgment. Precision saves lives. That's the line I repeat on camera and off it. So I stood there in the chalk-colored basin of Granite Hollow, listening to the dry wind and the thin scrape of grit shifting under my boots, holding the pack like it was something alive and unsettled. I crouched and unzipped it again. The camera lay still this time, lens capped, no blinking lights, no internal motor hum. I pressed the shutter myself once. The soft mechanical snap sounded normal, and then pressed it again. Nothing abnormal. I checked the battery. No overheating. No glitching buttons. The device was behaving as if nothing had happened at all. I closed the pack slowly, the zipper catching once on a strap before pulling clean across. That small catch made my shoulders jump more than it should have. My nerves were electric by then, hyper-alert, every sense tuned too sharply. I could hear my heartbeat louder than the wind. I made myself take 10 slow breaths. Controlled. Even. If someone was out here, watching, following, activating my cameras, they were staying out of sight with inhuman precision. And if no one was out here, if the malfunction was real, then I was letting fear override training. Neither option felt good. I slung the pack over one shoulder and scanned the granite corridor leading back toward the wider flats. The hollow looked different than it had an hour before. I don't mean in any supernatural way. More subtle than that. The light had shifted as the morning wore on, shadows stretching across the stone like long fingers pointing toward nothing. The air carried a faint metallic edge, like the taste of blood on a bitten lip. I started walking, keeping my ears open for the crunch of another set of footsteps. Every few minutes, I stopped and listened. The hollow was loud in its silence, wind scratching, dust skating, the distant groan of a boulder somewhere heating in the sun. But never footsteps. Never anything that sounded like someone 3 feet behind me, as the camera had shown. Around 9 o'clock, I reached a narrow split in the granite wall, a natural corridor only wide enough for one person to pass at a time. I had come through it earlier without noticing anything strange. Now, though, the space felt tighter. The walls felt closer. My breath echoed faintly. Halfway through, I caught a sound behind me. Not footsteps. The soft, clear click of a camera shutter. I spun so fast I slammed my shoulder into the wall. The jolt sent a flash of heat down my arm. Nobody stood in the corridor. Nobody stood beyond it. Nothing moved but wind-blown dust. But the sound had been unmistakable, impossibly close. Less than a meter behind me. I tried to swallow, but my throat felt dry and raw. Something primal in me, something I have never felt on any expedition, rose like a wave. An instinct older than language. The instinct that says, "You are not alone, and the thing with you does not wish you well." I backed out of the corridor with my eyes locked on the narrow passage, afraid to look away in case something stepped into view only when I wasn't watching. When I finally reached the open expanse of the hollow again, I turned in a slow circle, checking every angle, every ridge, every outcrop. Still nothing. I took out my phone. 0 bars. Not even the flicker of a signal. I decided to try one more clip before hiking out, not because I wanted to, but because documenting anomalies is part of the job. If the camera sabotage continued, it would validate that something was systemically failing or intentionally interfering. I set my main camera on a small ledge, angled slightly down so it framed me with the granite behind. I hit record. The light blinked red. The timer started. I spoke calmly at first, stating the time, location, equipment status. But even as I talked, I felt it again. The awareness, like someone's eyes traced the line of my spine. My voice wavered once, caught itself, steadied. I was finishing a sentence when the camera light blinked off. No low battery alert. No overheating indicator. It simply shut down. I stepped toward it, frustration shaking into my hands, and reached for the power switch. Before I touched it, the camera switched back on. By itself. The monitor flickered, glitched, steadied. A live feed appeared, a view of me standing in front of the granite wall. But the image was slightly delayed. Not frozen, not replaying, lagging behind reality by half a second. I lifted my hand slowly. On screen, my hand lifted half a beat later. My chest tightened. I took a step closer. On screen, something moved behind me. Not on the granite wall. Not in the real world. Only on the camera feed. A figure, walking into frame from the left edge. No details. Just the motion of a body stepping closer, 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 until it stood directly behind me. I didn't dare turn around. The part of my brain that handles logic was still working, still shouting through the static. If you turn and it's real, you won't be able to react. If you turn and it's not real, your mind will snap anyway. The figure on screen leaned forward, as if inches from the back of my head. Then the camera shut off again. The wind stopped. The entire hollow went silent. And something exhaled behind me. I didn't run. I should have. Every normal human impulse would tell you that if something breathes behind you in an empty basin where no one should exist, you run until your legs stop working. But instinct in survival situations is a tricky thing. Sometimes the body freezes not from fear but from calculation. Movement can trigger pursuit. Stillness can buy you seconds. I stayed perfectly still, breath caught halfway up my throat, waiting for the warm pressure of another exhale against my neck. It didn't come. The air behind me remained motionless, colder somehow, like a pocket of shade that hadn't existed a moment ago. I forced myself to inhale slowly. The sound of my own breath felt too loud, too exposed. When my lungs steadied, I bent in one slow, deliberate motion to pick up the camera. I kept my eyes down, refusing to look over my shoulder. The idea that something might be standing there, close enough that my hair should have shifted, was too much to risk confronting. I grabbed the camera and backed away a few steps, keeping it between me and whatever I refused to look at. Only when I'd put several meters of open ground between me and that spot did I finally turn. The granite wall stood empty. No prints, no shadows, nothing disturbed, but the air still carried that unnatural chill, as if whatever had been breathing wasn't fully gone, just waiting. My hands shook harder than I wanted them to. I checked the camera. The file clip icon blinked. It had saved something. I tapped play. The screen stayed black for 2 full seconds before the image snapped on. Me, standing rigid, shoulders tight, speaking to the camera just before it had shut down. Then the figure walked into frame again. This time, it was clearer. Not enough to see a face, not enough to identify clothing or features, but enough to confirm height, posture, gait. Someone tall, shoulders slightly hunched, steps precise and silent, like they were mimicking how a person walks rather than naturally doing it. The figure approached my back in the recording. I reached up instinctively to my own shoulder in the present moment, half expecting a hand to settle there through some impossible delay. Nothing touched me, but my pulse banged in my throat. In the clip, the figure leaned close as someone would lean if whispering into your ear. Then the footage cut to static. I lowered the camera slowly. Something fundamental in my understanding of the world shifted at that moment, not into supernatural belief, but into the sharp, cold acceptance that someone was in Granite Hollow with me. Someone who didn't want to be seen except through my devices. Someone who had been close enough to breathe behind me. I forced myself into motion. Staying put felt like offering myself. I needed to reach the trail out, just a few miles across the basin, over one ridge, and back toward the fire road where my vehicle was parked. The route wasn't complicated, but Granite Hollow can distort distance perception. Everything looks closer than it is. I checked my compass, set my bearing, and started moving. Every few seconds, I glanced behind me. Nothing. Always nothing. But the sense of being watched didn't ease. It thickened. 20 minutes into the hike out, I heard the shudder. Not muffled by a pack. Not distant. A single click. I stopped dead, heartbeat slamming. The sound had come from my left, where a cluster of granite boulders created a small pocket of shade. I stared at the dark gap between them. A camera shutter doesn't echo like that on open stone unless it's extremely close. I crouched, slowly unbuckled my pack, and pulled out the DSLR. Before I even powered it on, the camera's internal mechanism buzzed faintly, then clicked again by itself. My breath faltered. I tightened my grip on the camera until my knuckles ached. A rational explanation. I needed one. A malfunctioning shutter. A short. Maybe the cold causing expansion and contraction issues. Technical failure. Even as I stacked possible explanations, they collapsed under their own weight. The timing was too precise. Each shutter sound happened only when I was alone, when I felt watched, when something had shifted in the air. I put the DSLR down on a flat rock and stepped back. If it clicked on its own again, at least it wouldn't be in my hands. For almost a minute, nothing happened. Then the shutter fired 3 times in rapid succession. Something was standing in front of it. Something invisible to me but not to the device. I snatched the camera back, almost dropping it, and immediately checked the display. 3 photos. All of them black. Not dark. Not underexposed. Completely black, like the lens cap was on. Except it wasn't. I zoomed in, searching for any pixel irregularity, anything that would suggest the camera had captured something but rendered it void. But the photos weren't void, they were pure uniform tone. I don't know why this detail shook me so badly, but it did. The metadata said all 3 black frames were taken at exactly the same millisecond. Cameras don't do that. Even burst mode separates them. I shoved everything back into my pack and started moving again, faster this time. Not running, just fast enough that my breath came short. The ridge leading out of the hollow wasn't far, maybe another half hour, but every step felt stretched. I could have sworn the wind grew quieter with each minute, like the world was closing its mouth around me. Halfway up the slope, a faint sound drifted from behind. Footsteps. Human footsteps. Crunching lightly over grit, matching my pace. I turned sharply. Nothing moved on the basin floor below. But the footsteps continued for 2 more seconds after I had stopped walking. Then silence. I couldn't stay in the hollow anymore. Logic didn't matter. Instinct took over. I hiked up the granite incline with the kind of speed that skirts the edge of losing balance. The ridge crest appeared finally, sunlit and sharp, and for one brief starving breath I believed I was almost safe, until my main camera switched on inside the pack, on its own, and began live streaming. The vibration startled me before the sound did. A tiny mechanical hum against my spine as the camera inside my pack activated. I froze mid-stride, one boot braced on the ridge's final slab of granite, the other still on the incline below. The timing couldn't have been worse. I was balanced between the safety of higher ground and the hollow yawning open behind me like a held breath. The hum grew louder. Then the soft chime of the camera connecting to its internal Wi-Fi blinked through the fabric of the pack. Live stream mode. I didn't set it. I never used live streaming in the field. The connection is too unstable and drains battery rapidly. My thumb fumbled for the pack zipper. When I pulled it open, the camera lay at the very top, exactly where I hadn't placed it. I had shoved it deep earlier, beneath a jacket and field kit. Now it sat on top, angled upward, lens cap off, recording light blinking. My chest tightened. I hesitated before touching it, as if the device itself were infected with whatever was happening out here. Still, curiosity pushed through fear because not knowing would be worse. I lifted the camera gently and turned the screen toward me. The live stream feed was active. The thumbnail preview showed my back. But not from the camera's perspective. Not from any of the cameras I had positioned earlier. This angle was higher, elevated, like someone was filming me from above, maybe 10 or 15 feet behind and a few feet up. I spun around, searching the granite behind me. No outcrop. No boulder. No person. Nothing elevated enough to match the angle of the footage. I looked back at the screen. The feed showed me looking around. Then, in the upper left corner of the frame, something moved, just a flicker. Not a person. More like a shifting of darkness without a source. I brought the camera closer to my face, trying to make out details. The feed lagged for a moment, then steadied, then lagged again. Normally, a lag indicates poor connection. But the weird part was that the lag wasn't random. It seemed to happen whenever that dark flicker appeared. I whispered, "What is filming me?" My voice sounded unnatural in the open air. Too small. I checked the connection data. The camera shouldn't have been able to live stream. It had no signal. But the indicator in the corner pulsed as if it was connected to something. Not a cell network. Not my phone. Something else. The feed zoomed in. Automatically. I didn't touch anything. The camera cropped tighter on my shoulders, then slowly tightened further, like someone pinched to zoom from the other side. My pulse hammered so hard I felt it in my teeth. Just as the frame hit close-up range, the feed cut to black. A heartbeat later, a single frame flashed on screen. A hand, pressed against the lens from the other side. Not my hand, the proportions were wrong. The fingers were long, thin, and slightly bent, like they were reaching from an angle that real joints shouldn't permit. The skin tone was indistinct, pale but undefined, as if the camera couldn't resolve the color. The image vanished. The feed shut down. The camera powered off completely. I dropped it back into the pack and zipped the bag closed so aggressively the zipper teeth scraped the fabric. This wasn't equipment failure anymore. Someone, or something, was using my devices, pushing through them, communicating, showing me angles and images that couldn't exist. My breath came faster. Too fast. I forced myself to focus on the ridge crest. I needed out. Nothing else mattered. When I finally stepped onto the ridge, the sun hit me full in the face. It should have been comforting, but the warmth felt thin, as if the light didn't quite reach my skin. I took 3 steps forward, and then stopped. Below the ridge on the opposite side lay the fire road. The same fire road I had hiked in on. But it looked wrong. Not drastically. No surreal distortion. Just wrong by inches. The curve bent slightly sharper. The turnoff sat a few meters closer to the base of the ridge. My tire tracks, faint but still visible, sat at a subtle angle that didn't match my memory. A trick of perspective, I told myself. Granite Hollow does that. The basin and surrounding terrain create optical illusions, make distances and angles shift depending on where you stand. Still, I memorized the exact entry point this morning. This wasn't it. Something was off. But it didn't matter. Even if the trailhead looked strange, it was still my way out. I descended the ridge slowly, keeping my eyes forward, though every instinct begged me to check behind. The feeling of being watched hadn't lessened. It had grown heavier, thicker, pressing between my shoulder blades like a hand waiting to close into a fist. Halfway down, my phone vibrated. A miracle of a signal. But when I pulled it out, the screen wasn't showing a notification. It was playing a video. Automatically. A video I hadn't opened. The screen displayed my own face. Filmed from behind earlier. That same slow, delayed footage. Me standing in the basin, talking to the camera while a dark shape crept into the frame. The timestamp marked the clip as recorded at 8:41. The playback lasted 5 seconds. Then the video glitched. The image zoomed into the space behind me, closer and closer, pixelation stretching into streaks, until the screen turned black. Words appeared. Not typed. Handwritten. Like someone was writing them across the pixels. Turn around. My stomach dropped. My fingers went numb. I didn't turn. I couldn't. The air behind me thickened again, colder than the breeze, colder than shade. Then something brushed the back of my coat. Deliberate, like fingertips counting down. The touch on my coat lasted less than a second, but it felt longer, long enough for my body to react before my mind could shape the thought. Every muscle locked. My throat tightened so hard I couldn't swallow. The instinct to whirl around, to shove whatever was behind me, punched through me with the force of an electric shock. But I didn't move. Turning around felt like stepping off a cliff in the dark. Whatever had written on my phone, whatever had touched me, it wanted me to look. I forced my breathing slow, one thin inhale at a time. The air behind me felt wrong again, colder, like it was shaped around something that shouldn't be there. After a long, silent moment, The pressure faded. Not all at once. More like something withdrawing inch by inch, peeling away from my coat. When the chill finally broke, I moved. Not fast. Not suddenly. Just one cautious step down the ridge. Then another. My boots slid over loose grit, but I kept my balance. 20 more feet and I'd reached the road. I could almost see the exact spot where I'd parked the SUV, just beyond a scatter of pines, a sliver of dark metal barely visible. Then my radio crackled. I didn't have a radio. The sound came from my pack, static, garbled, faint at first, then sharpening as if someone adjusted a dial. I froze again, staring at the zipper, scared to open the pack, scared not to. The voice came through suddenly, distorted, thin as wire. Elise. My name stretched across 2 seconds, clipped at both ends. Every hair on my arm stood up. I checked my phone, no service. Checked my body mic, still powered off. Checked the DSO, silent. Checked the main camera, should have been off after the live stream collapsed. But the voice came again. Elise, you shouldn't have. The last word dissolved into static. I backed away from the pack like it might explode. My foot caught on a rock and I stumbled, but I kept my gaze fixed on the zipper. The voice returned a third time, clearer, the static clearing just enough that the tone could slip through. It was my voice. Not perfectly. Slightly off, like an old recording warped by heat. I knelt slowly, a tight, nauseating pressure building behind my ribs. My fingers trembled as I unzipped the pack. The radio-like crackling grew louder. The sound wasn't coming from the DSO or the secondary camera. It came from the trail cam, the same one that had turned on by itself earlier. Its screen glowed faintly, flickering. The speaker hissed. Then my warped voice came through again. You shouldn't have turned around. I hadn't. But the voice didn't know that. Or it wanted me to think it didn't. I jammed the trail cam's power switch down. The screen didn't turn off. I held it longer. Nothing. The speaker continued hissing. So I hurled the trail cam down the ridge slope. It clattered against granite, bounced once, twice, landed near a boulder, and immediately clicked a photo. I didn't look at the screen. I didn't want to see what it captured. The fire road waited below. Safety was a lie, probably, but it was closer than whatever was on that ridge. I slung the pack over one shoulder and started moving again, boots crunching fast over loose stone. The pines grew larger as I descended, the dark shape of my SUV taking form through the branches. I kept glancing behind me, expecting to see a figure silhouetted on the ridge. Nothing followed. But the silence was worse now, heavy like wool packed around my ears. Even the wind had stopped. My breath felt too loud. My heartbeat felt amplified. At the base of the ridge, I stepped onto the fire road. The relief of flat ground nearly buckled my knees. I took 3 long breaths, each one burning in my chest. Then I noticed something wrong. My tire tracks. They were fresh. Too fresh. I crouched to look closer. The edges were sharp. No breeze-blown dust softened them. No animal prints crossed them. They looked like they'd been made minutes ago. But I had arrived before sunrise. I traced the tracks backward with my eyes. They didn't come from the direction of the park entrance. They came from deeper into the woods, farther than I had ever driven. Like my vehicle had arrived from somewhere else entirely. I stood slowly, scanning the pines. Their shadows looked stretched, uneven, as if the morning sun were at a slightly different angle than it should have been at this hour. I approached the SUV carefully, checking the ground around it. No footprints. Not mine from earlier. Not anyone else's. Just those perfect tire tracks. The wind finally returned. One long, low gust that carried cold air and the faint scent of granite dust. Then something rattled inside the SUV. Metal on metal, like someone shifting in the back. I stepped backward, hands tightening into fists without thinking. The SUV windows were tinted, too dark to see inside. I circled slowly toward the driver's side, each footstep deliberate. Halfway around, my phone vibrated again. I nearly dropped it. The lock screen displayed a new notification. New video saved. But it wasn't time-stamped at the moment I received it. It was time-stamped 10 minutes in the future. 10:27 a.m. The phone read 10:17. My stomach twisted. I opened the video. The first frame was black. Then the image flickered and stabilized. The footage showed me, 10 minutes from now, standing next to my SUV. The camera angle was low, as if placed on the gravel road behind me. In the video, my future self turned toward the back door of the SUV, and the back door slowly opened from the inside. The recording ended there. A single still frame lingered on the screen. My face turned toward something emerging from the back seat, eyes wide, mouth just starting to open. Behind me, in the present moment, metal clicked softly inside the SUV again. The back door latch, lifting. The click of the back door latch was so soft I almost convinced myself I imagined it, almost. But the sound came again, a tiny metallic shift, unmistakably real. Every muscle in my legs wanted to bolt, but I stayed rooted, eyes fixed on the tinted window. My breath fogged the cold morning air as I stared at my own reflection, small, tense, waiting for the door to move. It didn't open. Not yet. I swallowed hard, pulse slamming in my neck. My phone slipped slightly in my hand, slick with sweat. The image of that future video burned itself behind my eyelids. Me turning toward the opening door, something stepping out. I couldn't shake the idea that by watching it, I'd already set something in motion. I had to move. Standing still here was the same as stepping into the frame of that video and waiting for the future to catch up. I backed away slowly, keeping the SUV in my line of sight. The fire road behind me stretched empty and quiet, dust undisturbed. The pines swayed slightly now that the wind had returned, but their shadows still looked wrong, longer than they should have been this late in the morning. The latch clicked again. This time it lifted fully. A soft pop sounded as the door seal loosened. I froze. My fingers tightened around my phone so hard the casing creaked. The door didn't swing open right away, just stayed half pressed against the latch, as if something on the other side were pushing lightly. Testing. The urge to run back up the ridge, to get away from the road, tore through me, but that would put me back in the hollow. I didn't know which direction was safer anymore. All I knew was that something was inside my SUV. Something that had been sitting quietly, waiting, long enough for condensation to have vanished from the windows and the shadows within to look normal until they weren't. I forced myself to take a step to the right, sideways, not backward, circling the vehicle with my eyes locked on the shifting door. If I positioned myself near the front, I could jump into the driver's seat and peel out in one motion, assuming the keys were still where I left them, assuming the engine would start, assuming nothing lunged out first. The wind picked up again. A swirl of dust lifted off the road. The door eased open 2 inches. A dry breath of cold air escaped from inside. My stomach dropped. I reached the front of the SUV and grabbed the door handle. It was icy, colder than metal should be after sitting in the sun for hours. My hand recoiled instinctively. I shook out my numb fingers, steeled myself, grasped the handle again, and yanked the driver's door open. Nothing happened. No movement in the back. No figure stepping out. Just silence. I slid into the driver's seat in one shaky motion and slammed the door. My hands flew across the console, searching for the keys. Not in the cup holder. Not in the ignition. My throat constricted. I checked the passenger seat. Empty. Checked the dash. Empty. I leaned forward, heart pounding, and looked down at the floor mat. No keys. I whispered hoarse. Where the hell are they? Then I heard it. A soft metallic tap. From the back seat. My body froze mid-breath. Slowly, painfully slowly, I leaned sideways just enough to look into the rearview mirror. The back door was open 3 inches now. A shadow moved inside. Not a silhouette. Not a person. Just a shift in darkness, like something adjusting its position deeper in the car. I didn't breathe. Another metallic tap. Then something slid lightly across the backseat fabric. Too soft to be an object, too smooth to be metal, too slow and deliberate to be an animal. My eyes locked on the mirror, waiting for the shadow to take shape. Then the overhead console buzzed. A faint click. My driver's side window rolled down 3 inches by itself. Cold air rushed into the car, carrying the scent of stone dust and something else. Something faintly metallic, like the air inside the hollow. I slammed my hand on the window switch. It didn't respond. The motor continued humming, lowering the window bit by bit. Then my phone vibrated again. Another notification. New video saved. Timestamp, 10:29 a.m. It was 10:25. Not again. Not another glimpse of the future I didn't want to see. But I couldn't ignore it either. Not when every warning so far had been real. Hands shaking, I unlocked the screen. The video opened by itself before I could press anything. This footage wasn't of me. Not this time. It showed the inside of my SUV. The camera angle was from the back seat, low, about knee level, pointed toward the front seats. Light filtered through the windshield, casting a faint reflection. For 2 seconds, the frame was still. Then something entered from the left side of the shot. A hand. Thin. Grayish. Wrong in its proportions. It moved with a slow, curious motion, drifting across the fabric as if feeling its way. The hand pressed lightly against the center console. Then turned toward the driver's seat. Toward where I sat now. The video ended abruptly. An image froze on the last frame, the hand reaching toward the seat back. Behind me, fabric shifted. A tiny indentation formed in the driver's seat. Something touched the back of my shoulder. Not grabbed, not clawed, just pressed. Cold, deliberate, testing my shape. The door lock clicked open next to my ear. The SUV fishtailed hard as the tires clawed at loose gravel, the rear end sliding sideways just long enough for my stomach to lurch. I corrected the wheel, overcorrected, corrected again. The road straightened, a narrow strip of pale dirt cut between dense pines. My pulse hammered loud enough to drown the engine's roar. Something moved in the mirror. Not a shape, just a shift of darker dark, like the interior shadows of the back seat were pulling toward the center. No clear form, no face, just the feeling of something drawing in, collapsing toward a single point. I kept my eyes on the road. Every instinct told me not to look again. Looking gave it presence. The SUV picked up speed, bouncing over small ruts, suspension rattling. The fire road wasn't meant for this pace, but slowing down wasn't an option. Not with the mirror refusing to stay empty. A thud hit the back seat. Not violent, more like something shifting its weight. I tightened my grip on the wheel until my fingers ached. The road ahead twisted slightly, trees leaning over like tall, watching silhouettes. My breath fogged the air even with the heater off, even with sunlight spilling through the windshield. Something pressed against the back of my seat again. This time gentle, testing. The pressure wasn't human. It was too steady, too slow, like something learning the shape of my spine through fabric and padding. Then the rearview mirror flickered. Just once. A static ripple. Impossible. Mirrors don't flicker. My eyes snapped toward it before I could stop myself. For half a second, the reflection wasn't me. Not fully. A shape sat in the back seat. Bent slightly forward. No features. Just a silhouette with impossibly long arms folded in, hands resting on either side of the seat behind mine. The head tilted in a strange, disjointed angle, as if studying me. Then the image blinked back to normal. My own reflection stared back, pale, wide-eyed, breathing fast. I forced myself to keep driving. Branches blurred at the edges of my vision. The tires hit a dip hard enough that my teeth clacked together. The seat jerked forward. Something in the back seat jerked with it. The rearview mirror trembled from the impact. When it steadied, the back seat looked empty again. Almost. A small indentation remained on the passenger side cushion, as if someone were bracing themselves. My throat tightened. I pressed the gas harder. The fire road stretched ahead, and for the first time, I could see the faint opening where the trees would thin, the small clearing just before the turnoff toward the main park road. If I made it that far, I'd hit actual traffic. People. Rangers. Reality. My phone buzzed from the floor near the pedals. I didn't want to look. But if it was another timestamp video, another warning, I had to. I needed any advantage I could get. I leaned down just enough to snag it without letting my eyes leave the road. The screen lit up. New video saved. Timestamp, 10:37 a.m. Current time, 10:34. 3 minutes into the future. I swallowed hard and pressed play. The shaky footage opened inside the SUV again. Same angle as before, low, from near the floor. It was pointed at the driver's seat this time. At me. Or the me that would be there in 3 minutes. The future version of me was driving, jaw clenched, hands white on the wheel. Something was behind her. Not fully visible. Just a dark shape shifting in the narrow frame behind the seat. The version of me in the video turned her head slightly, as if hearing something. Then the camera angle changed abruptly. It tilted toward the passenger window. The glass had a smear across it. A handprint. Long fingers. Longer than any human hand. The video zoomed in on it. Then stopped. A single still image lingered. A blurred gray shape just outside the window, positioned at the same angle as the reflection I'd glimpsed in the mirror minutes earlier. I lowered the phone, breath shaking. The SUV engine whined harder as I floored the accelerator. The road ahead narrowed, curving left around a cluster of rocks. The clearing was close. Another thud hit the back seat. Hard this time. The SUV swerved slightly. I corrected it, but my heart was punching against my ribcage, blood roaring in my ears. A second thud. Then something slid forward. Fabric tightening. Weight shifting. I clenched my teeth, refusing to look in the mirror. The pressing awareness behind me felt larger now, taking up more space, leaning closer, heavy enough to alter the air. A rasping sound followed. Not warm like before. Cold, slow, drawn out. It scraped the back of my neck even without touching me. The clearing appeared ahead. I pushed the SUV harder. A shadow stretched across the passenger window, long, finger-like. flickering as if something moved just outside the glass. The clearing broke open around me, sunlight flooding the windshield. Relief flared hot in my chest. And then, the passenger window cracked. A thin, sharp line shot across the glass like something pressed against it from outside with precise force. I didn't think. I jerked the wheel right, tires screaming against gravel, SUV lurching dangerously close to tipping. The pressure behind my seat slammed sideways as the vehicle skidded. We hit the edge of the clearing in a spray of dust. I steadied the wheel just in time to keep from plowing into a fallen log. The pressure in the back seat vanished. Not gradually. Gone, instantly, like something had been ripped out of the car by crossing into the clearing sunlight. The back seat fell silent. No shifting fabric. No cold air. No movement. The mirror showed only empty cushions and my own horrified eyes. I didn't slow down. I drove straight through the clearing, hitting the turnoff to the main road so fast the suspension groaned. Only when the pines thinned enough that the fire road widened did I finally let myself breathe. For a moment I believed I had outrun it, until my phone buzzed one more time. Another notification. New video saved. Timestamp 10:40 a.m. I checked the clock. 10:40. The video had already arrived from the present moment. It was only 3 seconds long. I pressed play. The camera was facing forward, aimed through the windshield. Filmed from the hood of the car. The clearing behind me, granite hollow, and a tall figure standing at the tree line. Watching the SUV leave. The video ended there. But the last frame stayed frozen on screen a moment too long. Long enough for me to see the detail I'd missed at first glance. The figure wasn't standing still. It was leaning, as if mid-step, as if beginning to follow. The trees closed in again as I sped down the fire road, but nothing, not the shadows, not the wind, not the shifting branches, felt as threatening as the last frozen frame on my phone. That tall, leaning figure at the tree line burned into my mind like an afterimage. Not standing. Moving. Stepping. Following. I didn't look in the mirrors anymore. I couldn't. Some primitive part of my brain understood a truth I didn't want to admit. The moment I allowed it back into my field of view, it would close the distance between us. Like the camera footage wasn't predicting the future, it was shaping it. I gripped the wheel so tightly my fingers throbbed. The SUV rattled over washboards in the dirt, each jolt hitting my spine, but I kept accelerating. I needed pavement. I needed distance. I needed other human beings to exist again. A bend in the road flashed ahead. I braked just enough to avoid sliding into the trees, then powered through it. The forest thinned, sunlight cutting slices through the branches. I recognized this stretch, half a mile to the old ranger gate. After that, the service road met the main highway. Civilization. Radios. Cameras I didn't control. People. My phone vibrated again. Not a notification. A call. Unknown number. My breath hitched painfully. Every nerve in my hands screamed not to answer. But I also knew ignoring it wouldn't stop whatever was happening. My thumb trembled as I tapped accept. Static flooded the speaker. A thick, pulsing hiss. I held the phone away from my ear, but the sound grew louder, rising like wind through a narrow crack. Then it stopped. A voice came through. My voice. Elise, slow down. I nearly dropped the phone. The SUV veered. I corrected it hard. The voice continued, soft, strained, like it was speaking through a dying battery. You're almost there. I swallowed, throat dry. What do you want? I whispered. The static bled back in, then cleared again. Lise, it's behind you. No breath, no tone, no emotion, just my own voice stating a fact. I kept my eyes locked on the road and refused, absolutely refused, to look in the mirror. The voice came again, slightly warped. Don't let it catch you in the trees. I didn't ask how I would know that. I didn't want to. The line went dead. Not disconnected. The phone powered off completely. My stomach twisted. The trees around the fire road seemed to lean inward, branches arching overhead like ribs closing in. The sunlight dimmed, not because the sky changed, but because the trees thickened as if reacting to my presence. I pressed the gas harder. The ranger gate flashed into view, old, unused, metal dull with years of sun and dust. The pale stretch of service road beyond it shone like a lifeline. I shot through the gate, the SUV bouncing violently over the threshold. Just beyond the clearing, a single dark shape stepped out from behind a pine at the edge of my peripheral vision. Impossible limbs, arms too low, head cocked like it was studying the angle of the sun. I didn't turn my head. I didn't let my eyes drift toward it. I kept the wheel steady. Nothing chased me, not physically, not in footsteps or noise, but I felt its presence latching onto the SUV. Not touching, not yet, just following with perfect, unnatural consistency, like a shadow living separate from light. Another half-mile and the forest started to fall away. The trees shifted from dense pines to smaller clusters. The air brightened. The static tension in the air loosened piece by piece. The paved road appeared ahead. I almost sobbed. I burst onto asphalt at full speed, tires squealing onto the main highway. The jolt of real pavement felt unreal after hours of cracked gravel. Only then did I risk looking into the rearview mirror. Nothing stood behind me. No figure on the road. No shadow trailing the SUV. Just empty asphalt curving gently back into the forest. But as the relief hit, something else hit harder. A faint reflection in the mirror. My face. Then, behind my reflection, in the back seat headrest. A handprint. Pressed into the fabric. Fresh. The indentation wasn't from earlier. The SUV had jolted too violently since then. This was new. As if something had been leaning there only seconds ago. I slammed on the brakes without thinking. The SUV skidded to a stop at the road's shoulder, dust spraying. I twisted around in the seat, eyes locked on the back seat. Empty. Just the indentation. But the air back there felt colder. I stared at the fabric and forced myself to reach back, touch it. My fingers pressed into the shape. It wasn't just an indentation. It was warm. Someone, or something, had been sitting there so recently the heat hadn't faded yet. A violent shiver ripped through me. I turned forward again, gripping the steering wheel hard enough to feel the plastic shift beneath my palms. The road stretched ahead toward the park entrance, and for the first time since dawn, the world looked normal. But as I started driving again, my phone lit up on the console by itself. Battery, 1%. Signal, no service. A new file appeared. Not a video. A photo. Timestamp, 10:41 a.m. The exact minute I had braked on the highway. I opened it with a shaking finger. The photo showed the inside of my SUV. Taken from the passenger seat. And in the back seat, knees bent in the shadows. A tall shape sat hunched low, almost folded into itself, its head tilted forward like it was waiting for me to look back. The next second, the phone died. And in the silence of the moving SUV, the rear fabric shifted. Just once, as if something unseen adjusted its position. The shift in the backseat fabric was small, barely audible over the sound of tires on pavement, but it felt louder than the engine, louder than my own heartbeat. I didn't look back. I knew better now. Every time I'd turned, every time I'd checked a reflection, every time I'd given it attention, something had come closer. Something in Granite Hollow had learned how to be seen only when I looked. So I didn't. I kept my eyes on the road, both hands locked around the wheel, knuckles sharp and pale. The highway stretched forward in a long, empty line, the faint shimmer of heat rising from the asphalt despite the cold air blowing through the vents. The forest pulled back at the edges of my peripheral vision, trees thinning, sky widening. The park entrance was still miles away, but it was real territory. Human territory. Radios. Cameras I didn't film on. Phones that worked. I fixated on that idea like it was oxygen. Something brushed the back of the driver's seat again. Not pressing. Not exploring. Just reminding. A light, slow sweep, as if fingers traced the edge of the fabric. I kept driving. My phone, dead moments earlier, vibrated weakly on the console. I didn't dare pick it up. Out of the corner of my eye, the screen flickered, not powering on, just glitching, like someone was dragging invisible hands under the display. Then it stopped. The SUV's dashboard lights dimmed for a breath, then brightened. The radio, which had been silent the whole drive, crackled alive with a single burst of static. Then died again. I didn't touch anything. Didn't adjust the mirror, didn't wipe my palms, didn't blink unless I had to. Every instinct screamed that the thing in the back seat hinged on my attention, on me acknowledging it existed. If I turned, I would become part of whatever loop my cameras kept showing me. A mile passed. The heat in the indentation on the back seat slowly faded, felt through the air itself, even without looking. The cold replaced it, creeping forward inch by inch. My breath fogged faintly each time I exhaled. At the 3-mile mark, the road straightened into a long downhill stretch. I saw a small brown sign ahead. Park boundary, 1.8 miles. I exhaled shakily, the first real breath that felt like breath in hours. Something shifted again behind me. A single, tiny sound. Fabric stretching. Like something leaned forward just a little. Hands tightening their grip on a position I couldn't see. The SUV suddenly jerked sideways. Not the wind. Not a rut. Not me. Something pulled the back end. I swerved, heart slamming, barely keeping the wheels on the pavement. The vehicle fishtailed once, twice, then recovered as I yanked the wheel straight. That movement, whatever it was, had force behind it. Something in the back seat wasn't just watching anymore. It was testing what it could move. My breath came faster now, ragged at the edges. I pushed the SUV harder, engine whining as I hit 70 on a stretch meant for 40. The trees blurred past, sunlight flickering through them like stuttering frames. Without warning, the rearview mirror angled itself down. Not violently, smoothly, as if a hand had tipped it. The mirror now pointed directly at the back seat. I didn't look. I didn't blink toward it. I reached up with one shaking hand and pushed the mirror upward blindly until it pointed at nothing but sky. The SUV jolted again. Less force this time, but enough to make a point. The message was clear. Look at me. I didn't. I gripped the wheel with both hands and kept my gaze on the road. A long, slow exhale whispered behind my right ear. Close. So close the tiny hairs on my skin rose. The SUV entered sunlight. Bright, direct, open sunlight as the last line of trees broke away. Instantly, the pressure behind me vanished. Not drifted. Not faded. Gone. like something had been peeled out of the car by crossing that invisible threshold between forest shadow and open air. The back seat went still. Normal. I drove faster, not trusting it, not trusting anything. The landscape opened into wide foothill scrub, the forest shrinking behind me. Another half-mile and the park boundary sign appeared again, larger now. I could see the small ranger booth up ahead, empty this time of year, but real. Human-made. A border. I rolled over the boundary line. The SUV didn't jolt. Nothing shook. Nothing shifted. For the first time since the cameras started turning on by themselves, the world stayed still. I slowed down. Just a little. Felt the engine ease, felt my lungs loosen. I finally allowed myself a glance at the back seat. Empty. No indentation. No shadow. No wrongness. Just fabric. Sunlit. Ordinary. I didn't cry, but something in me, some coil wrapped tight inside, finally eased. I pulled off onto the wide gravel turnout beyond the booth. Turned off the engine. Sat with both hands still gripping the wheel until my fingers cramped. When I finally released it, I looked at my phone. No surprise there. I reached back for my pack, hesitated, then forced myself to check inside. Camera gear, silent. Trail cam, dead screen. No humming. No shutters. Everything finally behaved like equipment should. I sat there for almost 5 minutes before starting the engine again. When I pulled back onto the highway, the forest receding behind me, the sun glaring bright on my windshield, I told myself it was over. But just before I reached cell signal again, my phone powered on by itself. Battery, 42%. Signal, full bars. No notifications. No videos. Nothing unusual. Except for one thing. In my photo gallery, a single new album existed that hadn't been there before. Granite and salt. One item. My chest tightened. Against every instinct I had, I tapped it open. Only one image sat inside. Not a figure. Not the hollow. Not the back seat. Just the inside of the SUV. My driver's seat. Taken from inches behind my head. The timestamp wasn't in the past. Wasn't from the forest. Wasn't from earlier or while driving. It was marked for exactly 5 minutes in the future. The moment I would be pulling into town. And the description under it, the one automatically generated by my phone's AI. The presence behind you.